Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia. This is my mother, Ema. Hey, Ema.
Hello, my little sweetness. How's my man?
Good. So, due to technical difficulties, this has been pre-recorded earlier than usual. And I don't know what we're going to do next week because the laptop is going to be in the shop because I wasn't paying attention. And I had my laptop on the convection oven. And then I forgot about my laptop and turned on the convection oven. And then now the laptop is roasty, toasty, and cozy. And the battery is shot, so we have to take it in, but everything else seems to be working fine.
We all do stuff like that at one time or another, especially technology today, and like cell phones falling in toilets and
Oh
things
yeah.
like that. I was reading an article about it, and this woman who wrote the article said she always carries a bag of rice with her because inevitably something like that happens to her phone, and she just throws it right into the bag of rice. But I remember when I was teaching Hebrew school, the Hebrew school was having this, the candy sale. Like they sell the chocolate bars. So, Pat, why is it as soon as I'm on the phone, like a 2-year-old, you need my attention?
Because she loves you.
I feel like I'm dealing with a two-year-old sometimes. I think they have the same intelligence. Yes, dear. Okay, enough. There we go. So,
right.
The principal was passing out the packets of chocolates to the kids, to sell them. And there was this boy in our class who was, he was on the fat side. Let's put it that way. Soft.
Yeah.
So he, so he, she's handing him the chocolate. And as she hands it to him, she says, I don't want to have happen what happened last year. And the whole class started laughing. And so I asked him, well, what happened? He said what happened was when he was driving home from Hebrew school, he didn't want to put the chocolates on his lap. He had some books there. He didn't want to put them on the floor because they were knapsacks. So he put them down where he was sitting and sat on top of them.
Oh, gosh.
And when he got them, the whole packet was like totally melted and smoldered, and totally unsellable.
Yeah, I keep on thinking of times where, like, I know we mentioned this in the podcast earlier, like a couple, episodes ago, like a while ago. Like as a kid, I would just like forget certain items and whatnot, like a block of cheese I was eating and then forgot about it outside for a day or two, or it would be like I would have major problems forgetting things. And then Tati showed me a few tricks. One, as soon as it enters your mind and it's capable, just do it right away. Do the thing you need to do right away. Also, speak to yourself in a positive light. Like, don't forget, say, I will remember. And when you say I will remember, it's a higher probability of you actually remembering and getting things taken care of.
I remember it's very, very often that my mother would ask my father for something that he was supposed to be responsible for putting away somewhere. And he said, I remember I put it in a very good place, so I wouldn't forget it. He would say, well, where is it? He goes, I forgot.
I mean,
Paul Harvey.
Yeah.
Was this, I think many people in my age bracket remember Paul Harvey. He was a radio personality.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, he wrote a book called The Rest of the Story. He was also an interesting historical researcher where he would research all these like interesting tidbits of history to find out what was the real story and what really happened in the end.
Yeah.
And he would have he had a broadcast like that called The Rest of the Story. Usually his broadcasts were about current events of the day, and it was news and commentary. But he had a funny story where this man was hired to be one of these troubleshooters in a computer company. This was way back, I think in the 90s, when the .com industry really started taking off, and computers were really perfected, and companies were switching over, computerizing everything. So this really happened. So this woman, something was wrong with the computer. She calls the computer company, the troubleshooter line, and he says, well, did you check all the make sure all the plugs are totally plugged in. Yes. It's plugged into the wall. Yes. Check that. He went through like a whole list with her. And then he said, well, what, he says, well, what's the matter? I mean, if it's plugged in and everything's okay, well, what could possibly be the problem, do you think? And she says, well, the building is without any electricity.
Oh gosh.
So he says to her, this is serious. She says, yeah. He says, this is very serious because you're going to have to pack up the whole computer, pack it up in a box, take it back to the computer company, return it to them and tell them you're too stupid to know how to use the computer.
Oh gosh.
He got fired for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think.
We had the one though about the coffee cup, the hard drive.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah,
We
that
talked
was
about
funny,
it
yeah.
before. That was pretty funny.
Mhm.
But it's just like one of the things also I was told, and I do this all the time, is if I need to remember something, I go ahead and I put it on my calendar or I set an alarm for it.
Mhm.
And that's how I try to remember everything that's been going on. But sometimes it just gets like, I guess, overwhelming when I have a lot of things on my mind. Like I realized that like I was working on some stuff and there was a lot of information I was getting a hold of, and without me thinking, I was writing down numbers and putting information down, and realizing that I wrote it wrong. And I'm like,
Ooh.
wow, I need
Mhm.
to. And what it is,
I've had that, yeah.
there's because there's so much to do. You're so, I don't know, so worked up, and you have so much stress that like you need to stop and take a break. You know?
I know, yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Trying to think of what I'm trying to think. Like, I'm going in my mind. I said, I know that there has to be something that I have done.
Oh, there probably was something when you were teaching or anything like that, right? Did you ever forget the keys somewhere or?
Oh my God. Don't ask. Oh my gosh. There was what happened was it was right before last year, right before Pesach.
Mhm.
And I was like one of the last people to leave the building. And friends of mine told me like I used to put I have like a little wheelie that I take to work because I take a lot of things. I have I have a sweater that I take with me because sometimes the building can be a little cold. I have an apron because I work with babies. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you need to wear something like a smock or an apron. I take my lunch, I take water, I take juice with me. So I was carrying it in a big pocketbook and it was starting to hurt my shoulder. My doctor said, he suggested I use like one of these small wheelies.
Mm-hmm.
He said that way, you can just wheel, be less strain on your shoulder. So I would just take my cell phone and the very front compartment of the wheelie, I would just stick it in there and, just go out with it. And a couple people told me, you should really zip up that front compartment. I go, oh, come on, because I'm just going to my car. As soon as I get
Yeah.
to my car, I'm gonna, just take out my cell phone. I put my cell phone in there, and I go out of the building. And this is one of these secure buildings where once you go out, we they didn't in fact after that they issued us these little cards, or you could get back in the building, you could swipe to get back in the building. And I think this because of this incident, this is why they issued it. So, but we didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is everyone's out of the building. It's going to be a week before that end of the building is going to be opened again. I go to my car, my cell phone's gone.
Oh gosh.
I go, oh my God. I said, what did I do with it? I thought, did I leave it in the bathroom? Did I leave it back in the classroom? What did I do? So I turn around and I can't open up the door. The door is secured. It's closed. It's locked. I go to the school. It's where we share the building with like a public charter school. So I go to that office and ask, is there anybody in here that can open up that building for me? I told them what happened. And the lady called a few people and she says, I'm sorry, we don't have access to that building at all. She asked the security guard, and the security guard said, no, he couldn't. But then he remembered, he goes, I think the cleanup crew came in a little while ago. He says, go around to the other side of the building, buzz it, and they might be able to buzz you in. So I ran around to the other end of the building. I buzzed. Sure enough, the cleanup crew was there and they buzzed me in. Whoa. So I'm going crazy. I'm looking in every single classroom that I've been, every place I've been. Can't find it. I finally decide to go down the steps, trace my steps. I go down the steps on the way out of the building, and there it was on the steps. It had fallen out of my wheelie.
Oh,
And after
wow.
that, I was very, very careful to always make sure now I zip up that front compartment of my wheelie. I don't care how short of a distance I'm going.
I think there was a moment. I remember you telling me when I was a kid, because I think I did the same thing as you did when you were a kid, where I was holding like a cup of milk or something, and you had a cup of coffee, and someone asked me like what time it was, and I went like this to look at my time and spilled everything. I think I remember you telling me you did that too when you were a kid.
Yeah, I was 10 years old. I was holding a cup of hot chocolate, and we were in this beautiful model house because my parents were trying to buy another house.
Uh-huh.
We need to move from from the city, and this model house had this beautiful white carpet.
Oh gosh.
Fortunately, I wasn't standing on the white carpet. I was standing on the this linoleum shell
Mm-hmm.
that as you come into the foyer, as you came into the house, and I was holding a cup of coffee like this. I had a watch on. My mother says to me, "What time is it?" And I go, "Oh."
I mean, I know I also had the moment.
Unfortunately, the hot chocolate missed the white carpet.
I know there's also like a moment where like, at least for me, I was looking for my glasses and I was wearing them. Looking for
Yep.
my hat and I was wearing them.
There was one time your father says to me, "Where are my pajama bottoms?" I said, "You're wearing them." Yeah.
That's funny. That's really funny.
I hear
Um,
anyone says that time like that, or "Where's my cell phone?" You're holding it.
yeah.
Oh,
I at one point like, oh, I'm just gonna call my cell phone to figure out where it is, and you realize it's like in your back pocket or something. You know, it's just I don't know. It's just being forgetful.
well,
It's
I remember the day when they had finally the portable phone that came out. When they
oh
first came out
yeah.
with portable phones, the technology wasn't totally perfected. So you misplaced that portable phone. You misplaced it, man. Later on, they came up with this button that you could press on the home, on the carrier, and the portable phone would buzz off, would
Yes.
ring, so that you could find it more easily. But there was an episode, I think, of what was it, Friends or something, where they misplaced the portable phone somewhere in the apartment, and they were looking into the cushions of the couch. They're looking all over for it. They couldn't find it.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I remember the pagers. The pager for the phone for those portable phones was like really good because before then we had everything. It was always connected. We had those long wires and whatnot, and you had to have
Um,
long cords.
was something funny. There was this girl I was friends with, and when she was talking on the phone, she would take the wire for the phone, and as she was talking, she would actually dance with it. She'd
Ah,
go under it and go under it and around and go like this while she's talking on the phone. Getting your exercise while you're talking on the phone.
yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, I'm trying to think also like in school, just being forgetful or I don't know, because in school it's kind of frustrating because they really try to focus on memorization, spitting out. Like you can't do. It's like Limude Kodesh was more critical thinking, but
Mhm,
Limude Chol, like regular studies, like non-Jewish studies, it was a lot of memorization. And for me, I always found it frustrating. Um, I
mhm,
think there was a trick though that one one teacher taught me, and it had this. It was a game that it would play. And the whole point of the game was memorization. But I say something and then you repeat it, and then the repetition, the subject gets longer and longer and longer, and you have to
mhm.
say it and see how long can you go. And we like everybody in our class, we started doing that. We started learning more and more of how to memorize, and it goes a little like this. Repeat after me. One hen.
Oh, do you know who did that for a comedy routine?
What?
Jerry Lewis.
Jerry Lewis. Okay.
Jerry was the comedian. Used to do that um, for his comment for one of his comedy routines. With there was one time I think he was before Johnny Carson came on the
Okay.
scene. Jerry Lewis was the host for one of the late night variety shows,
Hmm.
and he would have guests that he would interview. So one time he had like a group of guests, and he did that with them to see how far they could go. Like,
Yeah.
what, I remember the 5 limerick oysters. That I remember.
Yeah.
Six pairs of Sassoon's shears.
It's Don's Donald. Yeah. And that's how we started to memorize, because in school we had to memorize all of the US presidents, all 50 states, the entire map of Europe. We had to memorize everything. And the tricks I would do is, if I was reading something I had to memorize it, I luckily was able to, on my own time, stay in a classroom alone, read the history book, and if something was interesting where I knew, like, oh, my teacher would ask me about this, I would write it down. And then when I would memorize I would read it, and then I try to summarize it and summarize it as short as possible, and then turn it into an icon or a picture. And then I draw the picture, and then I'd have myself memorize the pictures, and then from the pictures I'd have the stories that would have the explanation for what was needed. So it'd be like I'd be a couple steps, but that's kind of how I would like work in school. I would
That was smart.
Little games. Yeah,
that was very, very smart to do that. I used to put stuff to music.
Really?
I remember there was one science test I had where there were I think we had to memorize certain elements that, I don't know, had on the periodic chart that had something with 7 ions or something. I don't exactly remember all the elements. All I remember was I put it into bicafilm zinc, zinc. Oh, one was bromelain, was bicafilm. I forgot, what all the elements were. But there was a man years ago when I was in high school. His name was Tom Lear, and he came out with an album. He was a professor at one of the Ivy League schools. I think he was a professor of physics or something, one of the Ivy League schools. And he used to take all these interesting concepts and put them to the most hysterical songs. And he produced an album with, he gave concerts and he produced an album with one of the songs. And one of the songs on the album was the entire periodic chart in song that he wrote.
You know what that reminds me of? Do you remember the Animaniacs?
Sure, I do. Yes, I do.
So they had a song called "Song Around the World," Yakko's Song Around the World, and it would be a song that Yakko, one of the characters, would sing every single country. And I only remember the first part, but it goes United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru, and then it goes like da 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 da. It went all over, and like people like listen to the song, like memorize every word and know every country. And it's just like, I think when it comes to education, and people are finally wising up to it, where it's not about memorization, it's definitely about entertainment and using critical thinking to entertain yourself to understand what's going on.
But the thing is, as an educator, this has been a debate. It's been going back and forth, because I remember, when I went to college in the 70s, that's when a lot of educators wanted to get away from this constant rote memorization and get more into critical thinking and creativity. And I found as a teacher, something, you need both. You need a balance. You need memorization to get the basic skills. Now, memorization is very good discipline for the brain. It really is. I mean, people who train themselves to memorize really can keep their brains very active. And like you see sometimes on YouTube, there's this guy that goes around to college campuses and he will ask the simplest of questions about United States history or about, like some sort of subject, very simple elementary things and there are college kids who don't know basic knowledge. Like he went around to this one college campus, and how many states are there in the United States? 50, 49, 51. And the numbers of people who did not know that was staggering. He also went recently on YouTube. He had where he went to college campuses and asked people who was the first president of the United States.
I think what happens a lot of times is that, and I've seen this, and it's happened to me, where people ask me questions, but it's like a lot of pressure, where there's a camera in front of you, things like that. You'll stumble. Your brain's gonna freeze. Like at one point, let me explain. There's this guy on True TV. His name is Billy Eichner. It's called Billy on the Street, and he asks people very simple questions, but he yells at them for it, and they stammer. They don't know. Like one of them was, "Name me a woman," and he's talking to a woman. She's like, "Name me a woman. What any woman?" She's like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know." Like it's just the pressure of
you might,
on TV yelling at someone.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. That's why, like, I don't care for those kind of videos, trying to be like, "Oh, look how stupid these people are." Blah, 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 blah. Like, no, it's probably the pressure. It's probably people like panicking and trying to like come up with some kind of answer quickly. But if you had them on like a regular day where they were just relaxing and someone making conversation, they would definitely know the answer. You know,
that might be part of it. But when I talk to like friends and relatives who are working in the public school system now, there are some districts where these kids are not learning, and they don't know the basics. They don't know who the first president of the United States was. They don't know. They don't know how many states are in the United States. It's, you know,
well, I know Baltimore City, I think it has a average GPA of 1.5 graduating. I think I saw that like this year. It was devastating. But the average Baltimore City high school graduate has a 1.5 GPA.
I was talking to, as a matter of fact, one of your sisters who works in the public school system, and I asked her, "Is it as bad as they say it is?" She goes, "Worse." She says she cannot get over how these kids are not learning history. They're not learning anything with social studies. They're not learning any real skills. I was taught, I'll tell you a conversation I had once. This has to be back in the year, I think it had to be around 2000 or so, maybe a little bit before 2000. Had to be like late 90s, early 2000s. And I got into a conversation with this Black lady. And I don't know, we were talking about our kids, whatever. And she told me, she says, I'm in a real dilemma. She says, my little girl is in second grade. I was sending her to the public school. She was not coming home with any reading skills, any math skills, no spelling skills. All she was coming home with was this leftist propaganda, this, politically correct propaganda, she said to me. So she said, I took her out, I put her in a private school, and she said, I can't get over the difference in just 1 year. She's reading, she's spelling, she's writing. She said, the problem is this private school is a lot of money, and I don't know if I can afford it another year. So I said to her, well, tell me, what was the name of the public school? Which public school are you sending her to? I was expecting, I hate to say it, it's going to sound prejudiced, I expected some inner city, Baltimore school, whatever. No. It was one of what I thought was like the more, how can I say it, the more advanced elementary schools in Baltimore County, and a nice area of Baltimore County.
Oh, wow.
And I was like shocked. And so the advice I gave her was, you know what? I said, whatever you can do to afford that private school, whether it's drive your car another year, cut out restaurants, cut out movie theaters,
coffee a day.
Not buy as many new clothes. I said, whatever you can do to afford that private school, you do. Because 20 years from now, when you have an intelligent, professional young woman as your daughter, you're not going to think of the money. Yeah. But you put her back into that cesspool of a public school system, and she wasn't learning anything, and she continues to learn nothing, and she gets into trouble. You are going to want to kick yourself every time you look in the mirror.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I remember 6th grade, we had a problem with the math teachers in my grade. We had like 5-6 math teachers just running through the classrooms. Like they couldn't handle the class couldn't handle the teacher. And finally they had one teacher that was able to, like, I guess, handle the class. But what it was she was just babysitting us. Like,
Mm,
we weren't doing anything. She wasn't teaching. She was just sitting there and just letting us run amok. And we were just being a bunch of dumb kids, like a bunch of sixth graders. And I
mhm,
remember we went had a math class the next year, and like I was barely keeping up, which is a simple times tables and additions tables.
mhm,
And it was really bad. Um, but it was funny because when I was in college, I was surprised how many people really didn't know certain things or couldn't keep up. Like I was in the bachelor's program,
mhm,
and I was surrounded by people that, like, I didn't feel challenged. I didn't feel like I was going anywhere. I felt really, really bored
mhm.
with the college education there. Um,
I know what you're talking about because I remember when I was in, I went all the way from algebra one to trigonomet.
mhm.
And then when I got to college, they put me in just, all I needed was 2 years. It was actually 1 year of one block of a math course, college math, whatever.
Yeah.
It was algebra one and those two, algebra one and algebra two, which I had in seventh and eighth grade. Of course, I aced it, but I didn't learn anything. I just took it for the credit.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's so funny. I feel like for me, high school was more difficult than
Yes,
college.
I had that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, for me, it's like the schedule was like high school was 7:30 to 8:30, you know, like 13-hour days. Just like you had like a couple breaks here and there. But it was a 13-hour day in school, like having to study and work and all that stuff. Then I go to college, and it's like you have four classes. It's spaced out. Each class is like an hour long within a span of a week, and then like it only goes for like about 3 months, for 6 months out of the year, about 3.5 months in the fall and 3.5 months in the spring. You know, and it was just like the easiest breeze that I felt. I
I've
mean,
heard that from a lot of Jewish kids who have gone, Beis Yaakov and TA and the yeshiva system, all say the same thing. That
yeah,
compared to what they had in Beis Yaakov and TA, it's like college for a lot of these kids is just a breeze.
yeah, you run through it because it's just like it's also that's why I really like the Jewish educational part of TA, where you're sitting down learning Gemara, you're learning how to have a conversation, you're learning how to have critical thinking, your voice is heard somewhat, and they make you fall in love with learning for the sake of learning. I
Mhm.
remember in 12th grade, for my Hebrew studies, I never got an exam, and I still early in the morning went to school and was studying for 4 hours a day, you know, with learning Gemara. And at one point, I stopped my rabbi, and be like, "Hey, we haven't had a test this whole year." And he's like, "Yeah, you're right." And like, it dawns on me, like, "Oh, we're just learning for the sake of learning. We're not having an exam," because I was really like having fun going through it, and like it teaches you a lot of critical thinking,
Mhm.
and a lot of actually entrepreneurship, because you have this idea where you need to get to point A to point B, so you find the most efficient way, but you're not necessarily needing to like follow some kind of order. You're just doing what you can to get to the last part of your mission, so to speak. You know?
What I think is interesting too is that when I remember one time, you know, occasionally I've sat in like on different like Gemara Shiurim. Now you can go online, you
Mhm.
can there's Chala.org where they have Rambam and everything. And when you first start learning this stuff, especially for a girl, we're used to like, okay, well, what's the bottom line? What's the punchline?
Yeah.
And you're hearing all these like different opinions. You go, Wait a minute, but that's not what we do today in Judaism. We don't do anything like that." And someone explained to me, "No, you don't understand. When you learn Rambam, you learn Gemara, these are opinions that the great Rebbeim have, and they like bounce it back and forth and debate it and discuss it. Someone explained to me, actual Jewish law, like we follow, is Shulchan Aruch, which happened hundreds of years later and also went through its own evolution. And
Yeah.
in some aspects is continuing with technology and everything is continuing. I had a conversation with this woman the other day. We were talking about how technology and globalism is pushing halacha like beyond what, like beyond, how can I say it? Like to the very limits, because there are so many unique and different situations we're dealing with now. We were talking like Shabbos, like your brother was telling me. There was one time he was flying on Thursday from Hong Kong to New York. And when you fly from Hong Kong to New York, this plane went over the Arctic Circle, over the North Pole and down. It goes like this, instead of like across the Pacific Ocean, it goes up. So he says there were 2 hours where they flew through a part of Mongolia that, because the international dateline was Friday night.
Mm.
So for those 2 hours, your brother told me what he had to do is he had to make sure he went to the bathroom before those first 2 hours, because on a plane, when you go into the bathroom, you lock the door, the light goes on. He had to make sure he went to the bathroom. He had to make sure whatever he needed, whatever papers he needed, put away all his pens and pencils, whatever he needed to be ripped or opened, he had to rip or open it. And he had to just sit there quietly in his seat and hardly, not do too much for the 2 hours they were flying over this part of Mongolia. I think what happened was, we were talking, this woman was telling me, because of the international dateline, she was telling me that there was a member of her family who almost wound up having to observe 2 days of Shabbos, one after the other. So she tried to explain to me how it happened. I don't know, but it turned out he didn't have to, but he almost had to.
I think I've heard something like that. And the reason why is because I think by Australia, it's the day after, and past it, a certain area, a certain location, it's the day of.
Yeah, I think that was what happened.
So
yeah.
it's this technicality that if you cross into Australia at a certain time, that's where you have like Shabbos for 2 days. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the idea. I think I'm seeing more and more of like footsteps of Mashiach as time goes by. Like I saw this one comedian say something that's very profound on a Hasidic level. And I think I posted up on the family WhatsApp, but I don't think you opened it. It was, the comedian said, it's hard to relax from a nap when your soul is tired. And like that hits on a Mashiach level, where it's like, we all know our souls are tired. We're just waiting for the Geula, because we're just going by the skin of our teeth, because like we have nothing else to do. Like we're just so exhausted.
But and what I understand though is, like they say, doctors will tell you that anxiety levels are up, since about the 1980s. But what I understand is there's so many aspects of our lives that are actually getting so much easier.
Yes, and what's happening
because of technology. Why are we so anxious?
My theory is 2 things. One, our bodies are finally slowing down to catch up with everything. And that finally, after all these thousands of years, all the generational trauma, it's finally catching up with us because we're slowing down. I understand. Do you know what I mean by that?
Not quite. Try again.
Okay.
Sorry.
So somebody who has gotten shot and they need to get to a medic, they can run with the adrenaline to get to the medic. But once they stop and get to the medic and the adrenaline wears off, the pain kicks in.
I've heard that when adrenaline is running, you don't feel pain.
Yeah. So in essence, we're finally finding tools to slow us down, to give us time to catch our breath. And these tools are getting us to really feel the pain. And that's why we have to go through, therapy and the medication, things like that, to work through these problems. So the next generation won't have these issues, or at least have less issues.
I think I know what you're talking about. It's like when someone that happened, like when you read books about people surviving the Holocaust, while they were going through it, they didn't have time to really process what was happening. They were just, the adrenaline was running. They were just working on survival. It was after everything was over and they were finally in a safe place that, like you said, they had time to settle and to sit down and now they started to process the reality of what happened. And that's when a lot of them really, needed serious psychiatric help and, kicked into this was a PSTD, as they say it.
PTSD.
Yeah, PTSD. Although,
Yeah.
I don't know if we did this on a podcast. I told you about the book I read by Eva. Eva, I think her name is, her last name was Iger. Dr. Eva Iger. I think that's her last name. She was the one. She specializes in PTSD, and as a matter of fact, the United States government employed her as this top psychologist to work with the armed forces. And she was in contact with Viktor Frankl, who also was a survivor of Auschwitz. They contacted each other through mail, and he developed his logotherapy. And she also, based on his logotherapy, she developed her own form of therapy for people who are going through, trauma.
Yeah.
And she said in her book, she talks about her family. In this book, she talks about, I think it was Edgar or Iger. I'm trying to think of the last name. Sorry, but and she talks about like what they went through and what she went through afterwards, and how she, got her education and her, PhD and everything, and developed, her therapy, which was very, very successful. But she says she does not like the term PSTD.
PTSD.
Yeah, my dyslexia is kicking in. PTSD. She doesn't like that. She goes post-traumatic syndrome disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
She does not like the term disorder used with it. She says it's not a disorder. It's actually a natural reaction that everybody has, that every human being has to a stressful situation. And she goes, it's normal. You've got to be some sort of stoical, cold piece of stone not to have that after going through some sort of trauma. And, that's what she bases her, therapy on. That this is a normal process, and basically helping people to go through this normal process.
Yeah. I mean, that's what people are talking about nowadays when it comes to processing everything. It's not about victimizing yourself, but understanding that you were a victim and then working through that problem and then hopefully coming out better on the other end.
That's true. That's true. But like you said, the irony is, like you said about like victimization is, we're living at a time where most of the victimization is finished. I mean, okay, yeah, there is some that's going on today, but for the most part.
That's true. That's true. But I guess we're a little out of time, so I guess we'll talk about it next episode.